We are back for another episode of Beyond Barriers. Beyond Barriers is a conversation with leaders and evangelists about their experiences of navigating an effective accessibility strategy. In these conversations, guests get to share their journey that includes the successes and setbacks with a primary focus on how they've overcome specific obstacles. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Alex Santangelo. Alex, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
It looks like we're both coming and sitting in nice sunny days.
Yeah,
Good day to be on Beyond Barriers.
absolutely. Yeah.
So let's dive into it. Tell me about yourself, how you got into accessibility, and what the journey's been like.
Yeah. Accessibility is something that I was exposed to like day one in my design education. My background is in industrial and interaction design. So at school, we did a lot of product design. And in traditional product design, like accessibility is, very present because you're designing physical objects. But later in my career, I started doing more digital work. And I was really exposed to accessibility in UX and UI work when I was at city planning. I was briefly there at the New York City Department of City Planning, working on, some of their interfaces. Digital accessibility is super different than, industrial design accessibility. So, that I kind of have touched it all over the place.
You hit the nail on the head, which I think everyone needs to, take motivation from, which is you said day one, right? Like from the education through your career trajectory, accessibility has been a part of the nomenclature and the focus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there similarities? You said it was very different, but like the similarities and the differences that you draw to physical product design versus UI and UX design, do you see similarities or differences that you care to share?
Yeah, I definitely think the biggest similarity is advocating for the user, like on part of the designer. When you come to a question, rather than making assumptions, is turning to the user as your single source of truth. So I think accessibility is something that touches all design work, especially user-centered design work.
Yeah. The methodology of engaging with the user, right? Tell me a little bit about what that looks like designing digital products.
Yeah, the first step is kind of finding a broad span of user groups because you don't know what you don't know. So, it can be a challenge to find diverse user groups. So there's ways that you can kind of supplement user testing through, different plugins and different accessibility guidelines, and also turning to like research resources. The internet is a vast, birth of knowledge. So you can really find answers to a lot of your questions. But when those questions aren't able to be answered, turning to the users again.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the best practice that we learn about good product design is user-centered design is the way to go. And the accessibility space is sort of another cohort or group, like you're saying, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and especially when I was at city planning, like civic tech is so centered around designing for like every type of user because, the products are public and have to be accessible to everyone, and especially civic tech has to adhere to certain standards and guidelines that not all private products have to.
Mm.
So that was definitely kind of an eye-opening experience, and definitely pushed me to the limits of my design abilities as far as trying to design for every user group. It's not an easy task, and is not always a possible task.
Mm. What were the barriers that you needed to break down to overcome?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the product we were working on at City Planning was a website that displayed zoning information. And so it was kind of an interactive map that needed to be used by New Yorkers, architects, government officials, and it displayed so much data in a visual sense. And so a lot of visually impaired users and colorblind users and just regularly abled users were having trouble using the tool. So it was kind of a challenge on all fronts trying to find a solution that worked for everyone.
Yeah,
But we were able to user test redundantly and kind of come to a solution that actually improved the experience for everyone, not just visually impaired users.
totally. Or and anyone who's using an accessibility solution for that matter, right?
Yeah.
So I think when you can find the impacts that address user experience overall, right?
Hmm.
Those are the best bang for your buck, if you will. And so, was there like an aha moment with the rest of the team to understand that by building usability into the product and having feedback from different cohorts, that was there like an agreement that it was like, oh wow, the product's better overall? It's like, no, we did this because we had to address something to meet accessibility guidelines that the company follows.
Yeah, that was actually, I think, the most satisfying part of the whole experience for me was after we came up with our design solution where we created this high contrast mode of the tool that users could toggle on and off. We tested our solution to see if it was going to improve the experience. And we found that it improved the experience across all of our different user groups. So it made the product better for everyone. Obviously, good products and good design is good business. Yeah. Sometimes a one size fits all can be possible, with certain affordances.
Totally. So fast forward from that role, accessibility has evolved, taken on different roles.
Hmm.
How has the strategy and the exposure to, I guess, the internet or to in-house resources, how has that evolved over your tenure?
Yeah, well, since being at city planning, I've moved out of the public sector, out of the civic tech world into, yeah, which is, more consulting and working with private companies. So that's very different in terms of priorities. Working in the private sector, there's all different other demands like budget, time constraints, and so sometimes it can be tough when like the lens is pulled away from accessibility and like user centered when there's so many other priorities. So that's been something that I've been kind of continuously trying to like fight against. Just like doing what I can as a designer and having hands-on access to what the work is. So I've been trying to still be an advocate for the user.
Totally. If I understand a little bit about IBM and its posture on accessibility, it is an important aspect. There's really good resources. Certainly, being such a prestigious company, they're not just good resources; they're great.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that investment there. But what's the as an advocate where you have competing priorities on projects? How do you make sure that you're able to get that mission accomplished? Right.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it really starts from the ground up with the design work that I do, as far as focusing on color, typography, and then completing all this design work. And before it gets sent to developers, doing what I can to test my work and to bring it to users and to make sure that the solutions that I think are correct, they also think are correct. Yeah.
Self-validation, right? How do you find these user cohorts?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a combination of just people that I have in my personal network, and also connecting with other IBMers that have different abilities. Yeah, it's definitely leaning a lot on my personal network. So maybe there's room for improvement in that kind of flow.
Yeah, I mean, I was so funny. I was talking with someone about, usability testing, and there's a ton of resources there. And I think there are some accessibility focused companies that provide testing resources, but you want as authentic of a potential user as possible, not like, oh, this person fits the the cohort definition, so let's use them. It's like, no, we want people who are potential real life users of the product.
Yeah.
So clearly you've had to navigate some of the challenges across a multitude of roles, public and private sector. How would you summarize some of the macro level issues that you see trying to implement and scale, right? Because you're potentially working on multiple products, different client or product demands.
Yeah, some of the macro issues, as I mentioned before, are dedicating time to the practice of
Mm,
testing as opposed to moving ahead to development. To bring up conversations on accessibility with the stakeholders can be something that nobody wants to focus on, so you have to advocate for. Like I said before, defining a diverse range of users, because sometimes user groups can get left out, like you don't know what you don't know, so you have to kind of expand your understanding of who's going to be using the tool. Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of micro issues, and you're wearing many hats.
and so I'm curious, I guess one thing you just said that made me think like the user group, the persona definitions, right?
Mm.
These are probably ever changing or even getting hopefully clearer because you have a lot more insight and first party data about who is navigating with your digital experiences, whether it's, your web application, your website. Are you finding that the definition of these diverse groups is changing, evolving, growing, shrinking?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on a product to product basis. Yeah, I mean, like one tool I worked on a few weeks ago was a concept for a dining hall app for university students. And so, like, that's kind of a very specific lens that you kind of have to focus in on. So you're trying to target that user group, and you're not really sure what you're going to find in there,
Yeah.
versus pivoting to, like, you know, a larger user group. It kind of depends on a case by case basis. And so you have to be kind of flexible, and definitely be open to discovery.
Yeah. So dining hall apps, super cool. They didn't have dining hall apps when I went to college. Some was probably like mobile order to go, although I think maybe we had mobile order, but I digress. So the ability to dive in to learn about the population that's using it, is that information being exposed to yourself at the design level?
Yeah, it is. We actually went through a process of reaching out to IBMers or anyone who had a contact that was a college age student, and we were able to like get on a WebEx with them and talk about their challenges and their needs as users. Getting that conversation like can make the process so much faster because again you're not making any assumptions as designers. You're hearing the firsthand information from the user, and they're also exposing you to ideas that you weren't even aware of yourself, and couldn't come up with because you're separate from the user.
Cool. So you talked a lot about, I think you've reiterated now a couple times the time commitment, the ability to have a diverse set of conversations
Hmm.
across diverse user groups. There's
Yeah.
already a lot going on there that before you even like manage your day job.
Yeah.
What's the trick to getting this to happen, right? Because I think the advocacy is certainly, a bug in someone's ear, but how have you found that you can create scale to your best practices?
I think it's most important for designers to be to be lifelong learners. I think that's like one of the big parts of our job is continuing to read and to learn and to see where the advances in design go, because we're supposed to be on the cutting edge of technology and products, and also times change and people change, and I think we need to be continuous learners so that we can continue to make effective products for people. So I think that's the one thing that I pride myself on being is, a continuous learner, especially in the accessibility space where, you can never learn too much. There's always something more to learn. Yeah, I think that's been my strategy. Yeah.
Interesting. And so I guess the caveat that I would say is that you're a day one learner, right? You've had accessibility prioritized from your professional and collegiate upbringing, right?
Mhm.
I I don't want to say you're not the norm, but I it's probably only very recently, in the last 10 years, that this maybe came into scope at the collegiate level, right? So what do you do if you're, let's take Bob, the other designer who is, been in the profession for 25, 30 years, really great designer, but Bob chooses to always learn about the things that he's curious about, and maybe there isn't that awareness about what is accessibility, because that's like the biggest challenge that I think exists, is like, what is accessibility?
Mhm.
So what's the difference between you and Bob in this example? Like, how do folks that aren't brought coming up in the accessibility world breaking through these barriers?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, at IBM, I think it's really amazing that there's a culture of learning, and there's also a really strong culture, like you said, um, of advocating for all different types of users. And it shows in the work that we do. Like if you are asking the right questions, if you are talking to the right users, like your work will reflect that.
Yeah.
So I think if you're trying to be as successful as you can, you're trying to learn and you're trying to, make products that work for the most amount of people. And I think it kind of speaks for itself in some ways. Yeah. So if you're trying to find success, I feel like the only way to find success is to go through some of these trials.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds so basic, but just to call out, not once have you talked about like compliance, right? Like, accessibility isn't tied to this compliance standard, if I understand correctly, that as a designer or shipping product, you're being mandated, like, just be compliant. It's like,
Yeah.
make sure you know your audience, make sure you know that there is a diverse set of user groups of all ability levels, and go design a great product experience for them. That's such a different mission than a lot of the sites, you go on. It's like, we adhere to YCAG 2.1 or 2, newest 2.2 for compliance. And you ask about, like, well, how did you implement this? Like, well, we just made sure that our website is compliant. And it's so nice to hear the conversation from you about usability versus compliance, because they're two different things, right?
Absolutely. And I think it kind of speaks to a lot about the success and, how great a product can be because compliance is like absolutely the base level. It is expected, but what's not expected is a great user experience. And I think that's where good products come from because compliance is, it's level 1, but compliance isn't going to set anyone apart because it's the standard.
I'm curious, have you received any feedback personally? I don't know how close you are to the client and delivering, but have you ever heard someone be like, "Wow, this product is hitting the bill of what we need from an accessibility need, and it's doing it the right way by creating great experience"?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that kind of I would hear more feedback in that vein when I was at city planning, when that was more of a priority. In my time working on different client projects at IBM, I guess I haven't had that experience yet, but I'm not saying that it wouldn't happen. I guess it just kind of, again, depends on the product and depends on the priorities, but the pace is much faster. And I think the focus can sometimes be on compliance. And that's where I get the opportunity to try to push beyond that.
Totally. Well, and hearing that there's a culture and advocacy for this, as your DNA. What do they call you as an IBMer? Do you have like are you an IBMer? What's the
Yeah, IBMer. Yeah,
I
that's
didn't I
our
pulled that out of my hat. And so, yeah, it's like, well, that's what's so cool is like, it's a huge global company, but like that's like one of the most, it seems like logical places to start because you're doing it sometimes without even knowing it, right? Like I hear that a lot where it's like it just breaks the flow. It like stops me from shipping good product because I have to test this thing before it goes out the door. It's like you're doing it in many ways consciously and unconsciously because of the DNA of an IBMer, right?
Mhm. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, IBM is, I think it's a part of its ethos is being accessible and being for everyone. It can sometimes be the client where you run into issues, with budget and priorities, but I'm definitely thankful that IBM has such a strong ethos and has a soul as a company as large as it is. It's kind of miraculous.
Yeah, well, well tenured. But I would say like the budget and the priority thing, it's like when you ask about these add-ons or change orders, and it's like, well, I don't understand the value of it. Like that's a lot more hard of a more difficult conversation than they're buying into the IBM design and product philosophy to
Hmm.
become a partner of yours.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so it's a lot, I don't know, it's like it's a lot less abrasive to be like, got all the scope, but we want to tie in this other thing that is important to us. It's like they're buying into your culture, into your
Yeah,
ethos.
because they see value in it. Yeah,
Right.
true.
So, I mean, you kind of just, you're making it, it's like, it's just do that and we're good. But no, that's,
Yeah,
you don't see a lot of organizations that embrace it that way. Right. Like,
yeah.
and that's a challenge.
Mhm.
So, evolution of how accessibility is changed um, from day one to today to where's the future? What are the biggest disruptions that are going to change the accessibility or the usability of media or digital content? Right?
Yeah, well, I think I can throw this one right back at you with some of the work that Wally's been doing. But it's got to be artificial intelligence and machine learning and kind of using some of these advanced technologies to aid and support the work that we do.
Yeah.
Using those tools to test and to create personas and to kind of aid in the design process and support user testimonies is huge.
Yeah. I mean, it's a disruption. I think the piece that I'm always like thinking about for a second is the ability to apply AI and ML, better understand your data, better predict what your data's going to do in terms of results. This
Mm-hmm.
has been in the Martech space for years. And
Mm,
now it's advancing even faster, but like accessibility is almost playing a little bit of catch up. So
mm,
it's a disruption to accessibility, but like persona identification and the ability to use your data to help understand, well, where are the breakdowns in the user flows, right? I was talking to a gentleman yesterday. He's like, we have a huge part that's all about workflow. And it's
mhm,
about what is that journey like? And I'm like, well, you look at that now when like from a buying and shopping cart experience, like 100%. But he's like, can we apply this to accessibility? And I'm like, and Wally is very focused on that. So it's, I want to see, and something that I'm very passionate about is that the advances that accessibility is making that are leaps and bounds, awesome, good things. Is instead of us playing catch up to a lot of what is, Martech past hand me downs, like, vision goggles and things like that. Those are disruptors, but like, how do we make it as natural as possible? So those disruptions, yeah, my hope is that we're not just taking the hand me downs, but we're actually the innovators that help marketing. Because like you said, right? It's when you went and addressed these holistic experiences, it was a better experience for everyone.
yeah,
Um, Interesting.
yeah.
So, Alex, I always like to kind of open the floor to things that we didn't talk about that you're passionate about, and offer a few minutes of conversation there. Is there anything from your side?
Yeah, yeah, I guess it's I'd like in the future to get back into some more physical product design accessibility research because I think physical affordances of accessibility are also really interesting, you know, in addition to some of the digital ones that we've been talking about. Yeah, I think, you know, ergonomics and, you know, thinking about all different types of physical abilities is really interesting to me as well.
Yeah, I heard someone brought up in a conversation I had that I think it's OXO. I have my kitchen utensils from them,
Yep, yep.
but like massive credibility and awards in the ergonomic design of their product
Hmm.
because it's universally designed, right? So, is there a particular area of physical product design that you feel more passionate about?
Yeah, I think in the future I would love to pivot back to civic tech and kind of smart city technologies and way of using design to kind of enhance cities. I think is really cool. I did my senior thesis on mobile public restrooms. So I did a lot of research about public restrooms and kind of physical affordances for, you know, all different types of users, and that was really awesome work.
Wh- Um, the first thing that came to mind is like our public infrastructure compared to other countries around the world is, while it's amazing and I appreciate the public affordabilities, kind of like martech versus accessibility, like we're a little bit behind the times. Are there countries that you see creating physical community enjoyment? You had a better word for it, but who's the inspiration from various locations around the world?
Yeah, in my research, especially with transportation and, you know, public restrooms, I was finding a lot of inspiration from Japan. Tokyo specifically has just some amazing examples of public infrastructure that I think the U.S. could kind of adopt and borrow from, especially because design and art is so rich in their culture. A lot of their public infrastructure has like a soul. It's not simply utilitarian, it's also beautiful. Yeah,
Well,
Japan.
like good product design, it's the right. You want your product to be beautiful, but you want it to be usable.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, um, I want to say thank you so much. Everyone that joins Beyond Barriers has such a unique take. We find a lot of commonalities with the challenges and how we're overcoming the successes. Um, the first words that came out of your mouth being day one is, I think, the inspiration that we all need to take. Even if today is day one, we all need to have our first day one.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. This has been an awesome conversation, and I feel like I've gotten the opportunity to reflect on my work and, you know, can carry even more of this with me every day. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to ping you offline. I want to read your senior thesis
Yeah.
and research there because I'm sure it's, um, yeah, especially like I'm close to New York City, and it's like the upgrades that New York City could take to come into the 21st century. Your paper probably might agree. Still, so Alex, thank you so much. Amazing conversation, and I hope you have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You as well.